intros. David Durfee, you know me.
Oh, yeah. You know, maybe we worked together for a while. It's Ed Woodstein, California.
Larry Richard Nelson, Orleans One Derby.
Oh, very nice.
Nice to meet you.
Michelle Bosley.
Greg Burt, Cabot Danville Beach. Nice.
Very nice to meet you. Yeah.
All right.
Budding district.
And you know Sedonia, Heather Supernaut is not with us today. That's us. So turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. For the record, I'm Larry Sakowitz, representing from Randolph. And I'm happy to introduce you to H 326. It is a short form bill, but there are some detailed consequences, but I'm just going to give you the sort of high level overview of what it would do and why I think it's important. It would greatly restrict the use of anticoagulant rodenticides in the state. These are poisons which people commonly use to kill rats and other kinds of rodents. But they're highly toxic, have a lot of negative effects. When they kill their targets, they do so in a very slow and painful manner. So there's definitely some humanitarian concerns around whether this is an appropriate way to be managing these populations. But in addition, these poisons are highly attractive to children and domestic pets. There are tens of thousands of documented cases of rodenticide poisoning in the United States every year. Like it's really a big public health problem. And also these poisons, they accumulate in the tissues of the animals that eat rodents. So animals like hawks and owls, bobcats, foxes, and others. And it causes widespread illness in these populations to varying degrees, but some definitely in very significant ways. Hopefully, if you will take up this bill and hear from experts who can tell you a lot more about those more specific effects on those animal populations. But in a time of crashing biodiversity across the world, but very much including Vermont, it seems like any significant effects on the health of wildlife populations that we should be very concerned. In most settings, there are much safer and also effective ways to control these creatures. Not to say that there aren't specific cases where this might be the best way, but it does seem like they are used far more than are really necessary for the effects that we're trying to get out of them. Again, I hope that you'll hear from others who can really talk in a lot more detail about alternative practices and their effectiveness and what we can be doing to minimize the use of these kinds of chemicals. This bill would also restrict the use of some other legal rodenticides, such as bromomethalin. And it would do so mostly near wildlife refuges, state parks, places like that, which are, it's really areas which are set aside specifically for healthy wildlife populations. And the bill also, it does envision that there might be situations where all of these, might need to have exemptions. But again, that's something which, is detail which this bill does not go into, which I hope you would hear from experts about what those exemptions might be. And then just to close, these projects, cause documented damage to people, to pets, to wildlife populations. They probably should be banned in most kinds of usage in Vermont. Other states are already going along this path. We would not be the first. And I really think that the benefits of these chemicals as they're used currently in our environment are not worth the costs that they're impacting.
So do I understand correctly, there are anticoagulants in one category and then another category that would be a separate?
It's a separate class of poisons that kill these rodents through a different biophysical mechanism.
And the bill proposes an outright ban in the first case and then a more limited ban in the second case?
Yeah, and I think the proponents of this bill would like to see more work done in the future, that this would be the sort of a place to start, see how it goes, and then look at where we're at in the future and see if it makes sense to expand to other to other poisons that are commonly used.
Richard.
Thank you. Larry, my wife's a veterinarian. And when this bill first popped up, I read it to her real quick and she came running into the dining room where I had my computer on and just started going off on. And she uses the technical, she doesn't call it Tomcat or whatever the rodenticide is. She calls it by the chemical in it. And I'll have her look at this some more, but she said absolutely horrendous, and she can't even save the animal.
Yeah.
Especially if it's gone on too long. So this bill is a great concern, and in the use of these things, I'm a licensed pesticide applicator, private, not commercial, but and as in all pesticides, they have to be used correctly. And the thing I hate the most, a little bit of a wander here, but Roundup. I apply Roundup at 1 quart per acre. Okay, it's just, hardly anything. Homeowner buys Roundup and goes to the dandelion growing through the crack in their sidewalk. And it's diluted, but they go, wah, wah. They're not happy until the water's running off it. Same with rodenticides, licensed Terminator would probably use them absolutely correctly, whereas the homeowner.
Right,
Or-
absolutely, absolutely.
so-
And I would imagine someone, a licensed applicator would also sort of take the picture of the whole scene, right, and be like, well, instead of trying to kill these creatures, maybe we plug this hole in your wall so they can't get in
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And that solves your problem and doesn't involve
Yeah,
as much
no,
cost and-
absolutely.
and
So,
things like that. So, yeah, so having experts, who are more knowledgeable and being a part of the process of this application certainly makes sense. to
no,
me.
this is of great interest to me and,
So I just want to
Yeah.
say, before we get into too deep a discussion of the merits of the bill, and there may be many, want to just see whether there are any questions about what the bill does, for questions about the bill. Yeah. Representative Lipsky.
I just communicate from a constituent, they talked about the impact on poisoning vows, hawks, fishers, cats, untold species. But my question is, they refer to Vermont for Fish and Wildlife has data that shows 100% of fisher that were sampled in 2 separate studies tested positive to these rodenticides. Did you all look at that?
I've also heard about those studies. Yeah, I don't recall if it was 100%, but it was the vast.
Cats, they
it-
say
I-
were tested.
It was,
1/3.
yeah. This is the kind of detail I hope you'll hear more from the experts but because that is exactly the kind of problem that I would love to see addressed.
Thank you.
Representative Markey.
And then, excuse me, and the bill that would restrict just people buying it for their home use, or would it include agriculture or everything?
I think the way the bill is currently, I mean, it's a short form bill, so it doesn't really speak to it in such detail. But I think the ideal situation would be that, yes, these, especially the anticoagulant ones are simply banned for use in Vermont. If you heard from experts that, that they needed to be applied in very, narrow circumstances where there were no alternatives and the costs of not doing so were significant, I mean, that's obviously something we should consider.
Do you know of other states that have done what your bill does, or even gone further?
I have read about it. I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Just a quick comment. There are lots of people that take various types of blood thinners all their lives on a controlled basis. It's basically rat poison. That's like that. Same chemicals
Interesting.
are used But it's healthy for us because we, you know, it's a
Measured doses that do what it's supposed to do, sure.
Good. All right, thank you. Or anything else you wanted to say?
No, that was really it. I would really love it if the committee would take it up and give it some more attention.
Good, let's have
Thank you so much.
French council come up then and add a little bit. You still without a laptop?
No, I have my
Okay.
iPad. I can put it up if you want, but it really is just half a page. What would you like me to do?
I don't think you need to.
Okay. So this is Michael Gravelowitz, council, as Representative Sackwitz just outlined. The bill would ban both first and second generation anticoagulant rodenticides in the state, including by commercial applicators. So the first generation anticoagulants are still in commercial products that you can buy at the hardware store. And they effectively work, we have a more delayed response, and you usually require one or more than one feeding by the target animal. But that's also how some of these rodenticides are bioaccumulating. The non-target or target animal eats some of this, doesn't die, and is eaten by another animal, and that bioaccumulates up the food chain. Last year, you looked at a bill to ban second generation anticoagulants, and they work in the same way. It basically prevents blood clotting, but they work faster. And they don't necessarily need more than one feeding. And you heard a couple of accounts of pets being killed by the misuse of the second generation. So you made the second generation anticoagulant a restricted use, which means you have to be a licensed applicator in order to use it. It is no longer available at the hardware store. EPA has moved to remove it from consumer products. But this bill would just ban it. And so whether or not it's internet sales, because you can still go on the internet and get the buckets of second generation anticoagulant. It would ban internet sales, both of first and second generation, but it would allow for an exception if, as Representative Sackwitz said, there is no other way to effectively control pests. That's whenever you ban a pesticide, you basically write in that type of authority to control infestations or pest outbreaks, because sometimes there is only one effective type of pesticide or rodenticide. And then it would restrict the use of any other legal rodenticides, such as bromethalin near wildlife refuges. Bromethalin's a neurotoxin. It doesn't affect the blood. It basically gives the animal edema and brain edema and kills it that way. But it would not be banned everywhere, just in proximity to wildlife refuges, state parks, wildlife management areas, or other ecologically sensitive areas. And to implement that, you would probably want to give the Department of Fish and Wildlife rulemaking authority to set where, so it's clear to the public where that type of product could not be used. So that's the bill. Generally, banning pesticides is a pretty short bill. You just ban it, give exception authority, and then basically rulemaking, and that's it. They're never really very long to draft a full form bill to ban a pesticide.
Are you aware of any other states? That question came up earlier.
The last time I looked, California had banned. But that was last year. I don't know what's happened since last year.
I just looked it up. California is listed as having the most comprehensive bans on rodenticides.
What's the mechanism so that companies know they can't bring something into Vermont? How is the outside world made aware that it's banned for us?
So you have to register your pesticidal products in the state annually. And so there's a list that they allow. And so when you register and say it's a banned, they won't register. You apply to register and it's been banned, they won't allow you to register.
From a practical matter, though, does that prevent somebody from selling something and having it shipped into the state, selling it online and having it shipped in?
That's probably the hardest thing for the agency to police right now, because they do go to hardware stores and they do spot checks to see what's on the shelves to see if they're compliant. But the selling, the remote sale is probably the hardest thing for them to police. And they do have incidents. I mean, the most notable one is the Rutland licensed applicator who was using a pesticide for unapproved use. He sprayed the entire motel in Rutland for bed bugs with a product that should not be in contact with humans in any form, and basically turned that motel into like a contaminated site.
Super fun site.
Killed the bugs though.
Like that, yeah, great.
I know from personal experience with growing tree fruit that there are products that apple growers and fruit tree growers use for voles specifically because they can do damage to roots and trunks of trees and kill entire trees. So it might be something we would want to reach out to Terry Bradshaw from UVM, the UVM
Mhm.
orchard, to maybe for testimony or to I don't know where I don't use it personally, but it might be something worth checking in on with
Good.
tree fruit growers.
One of the things that was testified to last year is that because it was it was just available to not just licensed applicators, it was not being applied appropriately, that it should have been being applied in a trap or a pod or something that would have prevented the non-target animal or non-target child from accessing it. Which is partly why you moved to commercial licensing for use, but I still think the concerns that Representative Sakowitz have are real. Maybe it's something where you have to parse the prohibition because of its use. Maybe this is the only thing that will be effective on voles in an orchard, etc.
So right now, after the legislation passed last year, and that was through the miscellaneous ag bill, so the agency came to us with a recommendation that we limit the use of those second generation to licensed applicators. So that's now in the books. The first generation that you described, currently, you don't need to be licensed. That's what we would find if we went and bought rat poison for home use.
Or bromethalin.
Okay, which is that's a third, yeah.
And warfarin, which is a common human anticoagulant, is also, although it used to be more common, I think it's being phased out. But it used to be a one as well.
Representative Nelson,
Yeah, I would hope that we would have Steve Bunnell come in from the agency to talk to us about this, and we went over it in our pesticide class. And the whole they've gone into stores and cleared the shelves because it's got to be sold to and the store owner could still sell it, but he's got to sell it to someone like me. You also have to apply it in a bait station And that's part of the problem. People are casting them willy-nilly. The other problem I see with this though is, all you gotta do is drive across the Connecticut River and all these are available.
Often the case with the legislation that we're considering, that we have a narrow state and it's not too far from a border for no matter where you live, you know.
I expect to find my seat going over there in a couple more years.
But hasn't the EPA made it restricted it so that consumers can't buy it now?
For second generation,
Oh, but not first.
not for first generation.
Something we should look at, for sure.
Jed,
Yeah, Mike, as I read this short form bill, it really only gives the Department of Fish and Wildlife to control pests as the only exemption. Now, I'm being a devil's advocate, but I don't want to pick on Burlington, but it's an urban community where there might be a neighborhood or that has, real rat or mice.
Well, I mean,
Is there anyone else, a Board of Health or some,
We-
if they have a out of control situation?
you have options in that regard. The Agency of Agriculture generally is the entity that regulates use of pesticides. Delegating use of pesticides and control of use of pesticides to municipality is a much broader issue. Most states limit the regulation of pesticides to one state level entity, and it's usually an Agency of Agriculture. There have been efforts in the state before to, for example, in Burlington, write into the city charter that they have ability to regulate pesticides, and your statute says that the Agency of Ag has the sole authority, but you could give it to some entity like the Department of Fish and Wildlife, which you were doing this short form bill. You have options. I think they're bigger issues, delegation to municipality rather than delegation to a state agency. So
I'm not opposing that.
Representative Zach, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Durfee. It's been brought to my attention that the representative was indeed correct that 100% of fishers had been tested positive, or were tested positive from rodenticide in that recent study. So I just wanted to make sure the record was clear that number was indeed correct.
That were found dead.
That were tested.
Yeah, fishers that were found.
I don't
Deceased.
know what the population
You don't know if
was
they
that they took from, but in that testing, that was maybe.
Right, so like 3 years ago in England, they tested sparrowhawks who only eat birds. And they found it in sparrowhawks, and they did it by catch and release blood sample. And they found it in sparrowhawks who wouldn't have been eating target species because they only eat birds. So that it was coming up the chain from the other birds that it was eating, which were eating so it's in living and dead animals.
Yes.
All right,
I mean, it just says here Cornell tested red-tailed hawks and it's in 68% in New York State, so.
Wow.
good. I think this gives us a good sense of what's in the bill anyway, and then we can continue to discuss whether it's something we want to take off the wall or conversation about. But for now, I think we can take a break. We're